Hi, folks. I'm so grateful to have Zan Tyler on for our podcast today. The Frontline is very grateful. It's really important to get perspectives from different people. And Zan is a legend in the homeschool community and in the battle for homeschool freedom. So we're really grateful to have her here today. And I will be just praying that you're encouraged, as I have been, from hearing from Zan, and also hopefully you can make it to our upcoming event where Zan will be speaking in San Diego on August 23rd at the CHEA Leadership Conference, as well as on August 24th at Homeschool Freedom Day in San Diego. More information on our website. Check that out, and hope you enjoy this interview. Welcome to the Frontline with FPM, where we talk about California politics, homeschool freedom, parental rights, and the family. I'm your host, Nathan Pierce, and thanks for joining us today. Let's jump right in and see what's going on here on the front line. All right, well, thank you, Zan. I'm really grateful to have Zan Tyler joining us on the front line today. Thank you so much for being here, Zan.
Oh, I am so excited to be here with you now, Nathan, and I'm looking forward to being in San Diego in the not too distant future.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. And I do want to talk about that a little bit. And I have appreciated a lot of the work that you've done over the years, and just defending homeschool freedom. I know that you've been involved in a whole bunch of different things in different ways, but could you, as a homeschool mom, homeschool leader, homeschool person that gives inspiration, could you give us sort of just a short background of kind of how you started out, and then we'll kind of go from there.
In 1984, so that was 40 years ago. And maybe saying we got interested in it is like too much of a stretch. We were introduced to it, and we had a situation with our oldest son who was very, very smart, but not reading in kindergarten, which then I didn't know was normal. Now I know that's extremely normal. So a friend of mine suggested that we just hold tight back a year and that he would be ready for first grade. In the midst of taking him out of kindergarten, which I didn't know was illegal, I was just doing what was best for him. Another friend of mine introduced me to Raymond Moore's book, Homegrown Kids. So I'm reading through this book and I'm thinking, whoa, this book rocked my world. Can you really have an education where the parents are involved, the children are happy, it's a warm, engaging atmosphere, and you get it done so quickly, you have time to pursue their interests and have your kids develop a heart of service? I'm thinking, there is no way, but I was so captivated by this vision maybe of what could be. But I quickly dismissed it because it was 1984. We didn't know, which is so George Orwellian. I mean, what a year to start homeschooling,
Right.
1984. But we didn't know anybody in the world, Nathan, who homeschooled, not one person. And I'm reading this book and I just thought, I can't do this. And I remember having this conversation with the Lord. He was saying, oh, yes, you will do this. And so I can remember having this conversation, in prayer with the Lord. I ran inside. I was out walking. I ran inside. I went to the public school district. I told them I wanted to hold my 6-year-old back. I had testing from a school psychologist to show he needed that. And they said, no problem, Miss Tyler. So I thought, boy, that's a relief. What was I ever thinking? I've got a very active imagination. And so I laughingly say the 6 weeks that I had decided not to homeschool, and it didn't look like it was going to happen, were the last 6 weeks of peace in my life.
Oh,
And a few weeks later, everybody in the neighborhood got all their intro stuff to kindergarten in the public school, except for me. So I called the principal and he said, oh, no, Zan, you can't put your 6-year-old in my 5-year kindergarten. I moved him up to first grade. And I said, well, that won't work because he's not ready. And private schools were filled at that time. So that left homeschooling as my only option. So I won't go into all the ins and outs of it, except to say we had to hire an attorney to find out what the law was because they wouldn't tell us at the local school board level or the State Department of Education. So we hire an attorney, he tells me what to do, and my local school board turned me down. I followed the letter of the law, and I have like the 2 or 3 inch application to show for it. And later they just said they were trying to make a statement to the state board. They shouldn't have to fool with it, but that wasn't it.
Mhm.
And so in the middle of all of that, we had to hire our attorney again. He said, you're going to have to appeal to the State Department of Education. They'll just rubber stamp what the school district did. And I said, well, what'll happen then? He said, you'll end up in family court. And I'm saying, Lord, I told you this was like a terrible idea. And in the middle of all this, I remembered that the state superintendent of education was actually a friend of my mother. When he was getting his PhD, he observed my mom's classroom for several months. So I was in the 4th grade, every afternoon after school, I'd go to her class and talk to Dr. Williams. And so I called him. I thought, I'm just going to call Dr. Williams. I know him. And I said, Dr. Williams, this is Zan Tyler. You won't remember me, but my mom was Sybil Peters, and I've got a problem. Can you see me? He said, listen, can you come now? I'll clear my calendar. This is a friend. So I get there and I explain to him, that just the whole situation. I wanted to hold the school, tie back. The school district said yes, then they said no. Then the school district turned me down for homeschooling, and private schools are filled. I have no options at this point. And this is what I thought he was going to say. Zan, I know you, I know your family. I know you were a concerned mom. So let's see what we can do to fix this. Instead, he looked at me and said, Zan, if you continue down this homeschool path, I can have you put in jail for truancy. I have never been so shocked by a statement I didn't see coming in my life. And I can remember, the verse that talks about how don't worry about what you're going to say when you're before the authorities. So I hear somebody in the room saying, well, Dr. Williams, you'll just have to put me in jail then. And I looked around and thinking, is there anybody else in this room? And I said, no, that was me. And so that was really sort of my, not to be too melodramatic, my Patrick Henry moment where,
Yeah.
I knew it was sort of my stake in the sand. And I got up and left. And so, I still remember, I can see where I was sitting in his office and where he was sitting in that office and how I felt when he told me that, Nathan.
Mm.
That's why I am such a proponent of working for freedom. I wish I could remember who it was that said the best time to work for freedom is when things are quiet and peaceful, because you can, shore up your, not defenses, but you can just shore up everything you're doing, and not when you're in the thick of a fight. And so that's why I just continue to promote homeschool freedom every time I have a chance, because people will say, Zan, the numbers are on our side now. And I want to say, yes, which makes the target bigger.
Right.
And, now with the influx of federal funding, we also have to remember, or state funding for education, we have to remember that with money comes increased regulations. And so we've got a lot of things that can threaten our freedom now as homeschooling parents. And I think the first big step is to be aware, not be naive. I was naive. You don't know what you have until it's gone.
Right.
I didn't appreciate my freedom until it was threatened. And I know the feeling. I don't want anybody to walk through. We had 8 years of fighting in the South Carolina legislature and courts to establish a good homeschool law. I don't want any mom to go through that.
Right.
I don't.
Well,
And
and I'm excited that you'll be sharing more of that story and probably some other stories at Homeschool Freedom Day, and talking about the title of your talk kind of says it all. The lessons I learned on the way to jail. So I'm looking forward to that. Would you say that's a talk that people can bring their whole family to? We're encouraging families to come.
absolutely. Absolutely. Bring your family. As a matter of fact, I retitled this when I spoke at the Tennessee Capital Day and Tennessee Homeschool Capital Day, and I called it Homeschool Freedom is a Team Sport.
Ah, yes.
And, and so it's not something we do in a vacuum. And Nathan, something you said to me when I was researching an article about one of the most beautiful things about homeschooling in the legislature is that they bring their families, and legislators never say that. And I had an opportunity after you made that point with me to talk to legislators in other states, and they just talked about the beauty and the power of having families at the state house because no other group does that. You might have the kids with some group that's trying to lobby for something, and you have adults, but you don't see families together. It's powerful.
Right, right. Yeah. And it really helps people, legislators and their assistants, their advocates, they're working in their offices, uh, to see that families are united and they care about each other and about homeschool freedom. So,
That's
yeah,
right. I mean, the reason we homeschool is that we love our kids and
right.
we love our families. And that's the undergirding principle.
So, I'm obviously excited that you're coming to Homeschool Freedom Day. Also, you're coming out to California to speak at the CHEA Leadership Conference, which is happening the day before.
Yes.
And so that is an event, afternoon, evening event that's focused on encouraging and helping leaders. You're giving a talk there as well. And what would you say about what you're perhaps going to share there, but also to perhaps the leader that's maybe on the fence a little bit about, leaders are busy. So there
Right.
might be some
Right.
still on the fence about whether it's worth their while to take the time out of their schedule to come to an event like this. And how would you speak to that person?
Um, there are two things I would say. The first is in our virtual world, and you and I are able to do this virtually. So I love the opportunity to interact and engage virtually, but in our virtually world, we need each other. We need to be in a room where we can reach over and touch, and pat another homeschool mom on the back or hug, or we need each other. We need to see each other and talk to each other. Jesus was a people magnet.
Hmm.
Everywhere he went, whether it was enemies or friends, people were drawn to him, and his ministry was with people. And so I think we need to we need to be together because it's kind of like water cooler talk in an office or something. You might hear a homeschool mom saying, well, I tried this and it worked, and she's a leader, and you can say, oh, I never thought about that before. You just, when you're rubbing shoulders with each other, you encourage each other, but you also give each other ideas and inspiration that you just cannot get in a vacuum. It's a team sport, and we need to practice together sometimes. We need to be on that field practicing together.
You mentioned that it reminds me of something that we did earlier this year at the CHEA conference in Southern California at Biola, when we were outside visiting with leaders for a couple hours in the afternoon, under there was a shade outside, and we just had leaders coming through this area and visiting with us and talking through just a range of different topics. And it really is a blessing to me to be visiting with other leaders. So we do really need each other.
Yes. Well, and I think I was there for the one you did this year. And it was so meaningful to me because it was just hearing people talk about what they struggle with, but also their victories. And this is what we're doing. And I thought, I just remember gleaning so much from those homeschool moms and dads.
Yeah, it can be a real blessing to be with other people that are alongside us in not just the battle for homeschool freedom, but in the trek, the journey of being in the middle of homeschooling and raising families together.
That's
So
right. And one thing I want to talk about too, Nathan, is just what leadership really means. I'm going to talk about influence and how influence really is the basis of leadership. And we all have influence as leaders. And it's sometimes we feel like to influence somebody, we need to pour in hours and hours of time. But the first person who ever gave me vision for homeschooling took me out to dinner and spent 30 minutes with me, and it changed my life. You know, you hear speakers, you can pick up the phone. Well, we don't pick up the phone anymore, but we text and text, text somebody a thought or an inspiration. And we can influence people in small ways, not just with huge segments of time. And the other thing is some of us just feel like I don't have what it takes to be a leader. And so I love to talk about John Toomey, who was in Minnesota, and he's 6'5", and I guess I don't know if he played football or not, but he was just a big old dude, and he was the lobbyist for them. And South Carolina had me. So I've lost my picture. It's hilarious. And I said, if you could choose, who would you want? The big guy who commands respect automatically when he walks in the room, or a squirt like me, because I'm 5 feet tall. And so we have these pictures, whatever it is, of what a leader is, and we know we're not that. But I just want to encourage people in the giftings that God has given them and the position He's put them in, that it doesn't have to be a full-time job. It doesn't have to wreck your family, but there's small ways and influential ways that you can impact the lives of others. Now, some people like you and me, we're called to this is full-time. Other people will be volunteers, and they give a lot of time, but they can't give all their time. And so I just want to encourage people, they can lead where they are, and they don't have to feel guilt for the time they have or they don't have.
Right. Yeah. And that brings me back to the project that you mentioned earlier, that article that you were working on for a while about capital days and advocacy for private homeschooling, for homeschool families to be able to function legally in our country. And you've talked with people all over the country about this, and probably from other countries, I imagine.
Yes.
There's kind of from talking with you and from my own experience, it seems like, as you just said, people just giving a little bit of their time can make such a huge difference. And
That's right.
that's kind of what we're trying to emphasize here at Homeschool Freedom Day coming up, is that anybody can make a difference, right? I mean, that's what the body of Christ is. We all have our own giftings, like you said. And hopefully everybody that comes will be encouraged in some way, shape, or form to do something.
I don't know how many legislative hearings I've been in, Nathan, and I know you've experienced this too, but I'll never forget being in one hearing where I thought, we are going to lose this vote. It was in the early days of South Carolina. We lost everything. And one legislator said, excuse me, I used to think homeschoolers were crazy. And I had one homeschool family who was brave enough to ask me over for dinner. I went into their home. I met them. I talked to their children. I was so impressed that their children could talk to me as an adult and what they were learning in school. He said it was low key, but it really has changed my mind about homeschooling. And so here's a family that I would say they took out 2 hours to have a meal, but they probably had to clean the house and go the it was probably a day or two project. But they had this legislator over, and it changed a vote, because then another legislator said, well, I met this homeschooler in my district, and I have to tell you, I was impressed too. And it brought up this whole line of testimonies for homeschooling that I never saw coming. It wasn't any work I did. It was just the work a family did of getting to know their legislator. And it wasn't a huge time commitment.
Yeah.
Very effective.
And that's something that so many times I feel like there's these legislators that, well, here in California, we're pretty spread out, a lot of miles between some of these districts. And I can only do so much. But a family living hundreds of miles away from me, meeting with their local legislator at their perhaps local office, or at the family's home, or at some event even that they attend together, they can make a huge amount of difference in ways that I can't, even if
That's
I
right.
try.
That's right. Because a constituent has automatic power with a legislator.
Right.
And so when you're a constituent, now, unless you just have a legislator who's going to totally ignore you, which does not happen much, even when you sit on opposite sides of the aisles. And, so it is so important. I've totally interrupted you, but it's so important.
No, that's good. It's so good. Um, when you talk with families about engaging, and you mentioned about how it's important to let the whole family or engage the whole family and bring the whole family. Um, have you, I don't want to steal too much from your stories because I want people to come to Homeschool Freedom Day and hear the full version. But is that something that has really made an impact in arenas and in actual laws being passed? You mentioned the vote being changed by that legislator that came
Mhm,
to
mhm.
visit the family. Have you seen that with families going out to legislators' offices as well, having an impact?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, so I'm telling a story on myself, which makes me uncomfortable, but Mike Ferris was down in Columbia for one of our first meetings, and he was asking a legislator, "What are you looking for?" And he said, "I'm looking for whatever is going to help Zan and Joe Tyler homeschool." And Mike said, bingo, it hit him just with all this powerful force that we've got to make the issue personal or
Mm.
we're going to lose it. And so making that issue personal is not something you and I can do with every legislator, but it's something as we work together as a whole and everybody takes that first scary step to meet their legislator or their senator or what do you call them? Assemblymen
We
in
have
California?
senators and assembly in California.
Okay.
Hmm.
Men and women. And
Yeah.
and so, but it's if everybody is taking that little bit of initiative, it can absolutely change the face of things. Absolutely. Does that negate the need for lobbying and having watchdogs at the legislature? Absolutely not. But it just shows that everybody, especially in the homeschooling community, has has a note they can play
Hmm.
or a section, a section of the theme, and you put those all together, and it's really beautiful music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned, I think earlier that uh, there's a sense that maybe the freedom aspect of homeschool conversations isn't felt as significant of a threat as it used to be, perhaps in 1984.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
what would you say to folks that feel like, oh, our freedoms are solid, we don't need to worry about it?
I would just say the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And the minute we all become apathetic is the minute we begin to see our freedoms erode. We just have to stay on top of things. We just do. You don't know when a new professor at Harvard is going to rise up and call for a presumptive ban on homeschooling. Well,
Mhm.
if you've taken the time to develop this web of relationships, you're building in protection when those unforeseen things happen. I mean, none of us want to be in a car wreck, but we put on our seatbelts and we have insurance because we know one day that can happen to us. We don't not wear seatbelts because we think, oh, life is always going to be great and I'm never going to have a wreck. And so I just think we've got to be prepared with the eventualities, that could happen.
Right, right. So looking at the future and kind of where we've come from and where we stand now, um, the outlook right now with more and more people being aware of homeschooling,
Mhm.
seeing perhaps schools and school authorities feeling perhaps a little uneasy about the number of people that are leaving public schools to go to
That's right.
homeschooling.
And some actual schools closing or merging or
Yeah.
having fourth and fifth grade together because there are no longer enough students there. It's a real thing.
Yeah, and I think it seems like there could be certainly areas in the country that people could be panicking because of and a push towards the restriction of homeschooling. Do you see what is your thought on just where we are in terms of our homeschool freedom? Do you think that there are
Um,
attacks coming still?
I think we always have to worry that there are going to be attacks coming. I'll never forget. I mean, I know, I will say this. I know a lot of amazing teachers and administrators in schools in South Carolina. I also know those who think no parent should ever have the right to homeschool. And I'll never forget meeting with an official of one of the, oh gosh, what was it? The school administrators lobby. I don't remember the
Oh,
name.
okay.
And he said, Zan, you are now walking on my turf.
Ooh,
Get off my turf.
wow.
And so, you know, there's a little bit of turf battle going on there, especially when we're taking seats out of the classrooms. And as he told me, it affects teachers' pensions and retirements. And so we're concerned about what is best for our children. And I can tell you, it is not fun to fight an entire educational system alone. Thank the Lord, our homeschooling movement grew, and Mike Ferris came in with HSLDA, and we were no longer alone. But we do need to be aware that not everybody's a lover of parental rights in
Hmm.
homeschooling. We would just be naive not to realize that I tell people every day they need to think about their freedom in some aspect. Pray and thank the Lord for the freedom we have. Take your children to vote. Uh, get to know your legislator. Look up what's going on with California law on your website. I mean, every day, just maybe devote 3 minutes to freedom, and it sort of keeps it in the forefront of your mind. And we just face a lot of threats to our personal freedoms these days, and we've got to be vigilant.
I like that. That's great. Just 3 minutes. It's doesn't seem like a lot, but it can make a big difference.
Mhm, mhm.
I wanted to also mention before we end, if you could just say a little about what you do these days for BJU Press, because I have really come to appreciate, particularly in the last few years, BJU Press, and I appreciate you inviting me out to visit with the BJU Press people a couple of years back. It did lead to me switching to teach my government class, which I do here in Sacramento, for homeschool students, over to using the BJU Press curriculum for that, and I'm really grateful for it. The students love it. But what's your role there, and why are you there?
I feel like I'm a little bit of an ambassador. In the early years when I homeschooled, BJU Press was the first group that would ever sell to me, including teachers' materials. So
Hmm.
that was quite an ordeal to go through. And over the years, they've become much more homeschool friendly with their hub and their videos and their consultants, 200 consultants who are homeschooling moms across the country. It's just very homeschool friendly. And in today's world, I think we have a lot of moms coming in from COVID, or moms who work part-time who never anticipated homeschooling. I mean, I feel like sometimes I was the original COVID homeschooler because I had no preparation or thought going into it at all as we began homeschooling. And I just feel like BJU Press Homeschool is kind of a full service solution for parents who need that. It's robust. It's very engaging academically. You can look at learning styles and all of that, but it's very true to a biblical worldview. And I think one of the greatest draws for me is just that Mike Knott and others are totally committed to state organizations and helping to stand strong for homeschool freedom. We have sponsored leadership forums. We've sponsored state conventions. I just feel like we've put our money and our labor where our mouth is. And so,
Hmm.
So at this phase in my life, that is just a particular blessing for me that, I feel like they bear the expenses of my travel and my speaking so that together we hopefully can bless homeschool students and parents and keep this message of freedom and the love of homeschooling alive. So that's really important to me.
Well, I definitely think that the essence of the curriculum and the heart behind it being a biblical worldview in all of education is one of the areas, perhaps the most significant area that is under attack, at least here in California, when it comes to education freedom. And so I think it's something that's definitely worth fighting for, specifically not just the parental rights aspect, but the biblical worldview aspect of it
That's right.
allow us to continue to use materials like that. And so I appreciate there being a place to turn. Not that there aren't other good solutions or good materials
Absolutely.
out there, but I have really appreciated BJU Press Homeschool's materials and their commitment to biblical values. So thank you for helping me to see that and continuing to guide me that. I grew up, as you know, in the homeschool community, and
Yeah.
so I grew up with a lot of Bob Jones materials and a lot of other materials as well. But I love to keep coming back to BJU Press, and so thanks for being there.
Thank you, Nathan. It is my privilege, and thank you for all you do in your state and around the country to promote homeschool freedom. So important.
All right. Do you have any other parting thoughts for us?
I just want to say, please come to the leadership. Okay, you're going to have to correct me on the titles. The
Sure.
CHEA Leadership Forum,
Yes.
and then the Homeschool Freedom Day.
Yes.
Make those commitments to come and be with those people who will encourage you and inspire you to keep going. We really need each other. I'm so excited about being out there. I hope I'll be, a small part of the success of the 2 days, but mainly come to be together, get to know what she is doing, get to know what Nathan is doing at Family Protection Ministries, and be encouraged. We've got to stick together. I mean, I just want us to remember that homeschool freedom is a team sport.
Amen. Amen to that. All right. Well, thanks so much, Zan. I appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you in person real soon.
Well, that'll be great. Thanks so much, Nathan.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us for that interview. Hopefully that was an encouragement to you. Again, the information for both of those events, the CHEA Leadership Conference and the Homeschool Freedom Day, that is happening on August 23rd and 24th in San Diego. I hope that you can join us for those coming up real soon. On our website, you can find registration and more information. We'll put the links down below. So thanks again for joining us. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Front Line with FPM. For more information about the topics we discuss here, check out Family Protection Ministries at fpmca.org and subscribe to our channel.